Hey guys, thank you for coming. How are you? Let's talk about two methods for writing to the cache from the CPU. We have the write through cache and the write back cache. For each method, we will talk about the advantages of this and disadvantages of each and how each method work. Now, let's start with the write through cache. And as the name suggests, we are writing through the cache, namely we write from the CPU to the cache, but at the same time or instantly in the same time, the cache writes what he gets to the main memory, namely the RAM. So as you can see in the animation, when the CPU writes to the cache, also the data is written to the main memory, namely the RAM. This is the write through cache. This is the idea. Now the write back cache do something else. He writes to the cache, and after some time we can define it. Only then, after some time, we write the data that went to the cache to the main memory, to the RAM. It may take time, it may take a signal or something, but it's not immediately. Not immediately when we write to the cache, the main memory also get the data. There is some delay. This is the write back cache or non-write through cache. Now let's talk about the advantages of disadvantages of write through cache. The advantage is quite clear. We write immediately to the main memory, therefore we have a more stable system, we have a more reliable system, because if something happens to the cache, we have the data also exactly the same data at the same time in the main memory. We don't have any period in which we have data in the cache that is not in the memory. So if the cache collapses, we have a backup. The main memory has the data, all the data. This is the reliability. This is the advantage of write-through cache. Now, what is the downsides of this? The downside, as you can see, we are doing much more work, not just much more work, we are going to the RAM, which is much slower than working with the cache. Cache is much faster. So this method is much less efficient in terms of, let's say, computing than the write back cache, because we are always going and writing in the RAM, which is much slower. So this is much less efficient than the write back cache because we are always writing to the RAM and it's much slower. Okay, so it's much more reliable, but it's much more slower. Now, the write back cache, it's exactly the same ideas, just the opposite from the write through cache. In terms of reliability, we have just a little problem because some of the data we write to the cache is not always in the main memory. So if something happened to the cache before it updated the main memory, the RAM, we can lose data. So reliability goes down. But in terms of efficiency, it's much more efficient because we are not always writing to the RAM. We can gather some data for some time in the cache before we write it to the RAM. So it's much more efficient. We have much less going to the RAM, which is very slow, uh, compared to the write through cache. So write back cache is much more efficient, much more faster, but it is less reliable. So this is the difference between the write through cache method and the write back or non write through cache methods of writing to the cache in the RAM. Thank you very much, and that's it.